Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the Divine Reality course. We are continuing with the moral argument or the moral argument for God's existence. In this section, we're going to start off by making a distinction between absolute morality and objective morality, because sometimes these two are conflated, right? So when we say something is objectively morally wrong, we are taking into consideration that there is a context, so it's context sensitive. So take, for example, killing, right? We can't, if you say killing is absolutely wrong, right? That will be a claim of absolute morality, that killing in every context is wrong. But when you say killing is objectively wrong, that takes into consideration the context, meaning that you have to look at, it's case sensitive, right? It's context sensitive. So killing would be wrong in most situations. However, there may be some sort of situation or context within which killing may be the right thing to do, the good thing to do. So take a hypothetical example. Say there is a crazy psychopath who has taken a gun into a kindergarten or a primary school, and he starts shooting everyone, he starts shooting children. Now in that context, in that situation, if the only way you can stop this person is by killing this individual, then that would be the morally right thing to do. Right? So in that case, what would be the objective thing to do, what would be the objective moral thing to do, it would be to kill that person, and that would be the good thing to do. So objective morality is case sensitive. Absolute morality entails that a moral act is good or bad regardless of the given situation. And that's not what we're claiming here when we're talking about objective moral values and duties. Objective morals, however, readily acknowledge the context sensitivity of some moral facts. An objective moral fact might be killing human beings without appropriate justification is wrong. The context sensitive nature of this moral claim includes an important caveat that killing must also be unjustified. So it's case sensitive, it's context sensitive when we refer to objective moral values and duties. Absolute morality is something different. Is that the case of killing will be always wrong regardless of the context or the situation. That's not what we're claiming here. We're talking about objective moral values and duties which take into consideration context sensitivity. So rejecting objectivity. Now there may be some atheists that turn around and say, well, I don't believe in objective moral values and duties, right? I don't acknowledge them. They don't exist. Well, okay, they can say that. They can take that position. However, this is a double-edged sword, brothers and sisters. And what that means is, as soon as an atheist turns around and says, well, I don't believe in objective moral values and duties, and therefore I believe morals are mind-dependent, they're subject to human beings, it's just the humans or the individuals or the group's subjective opinion, well, now that puts them in a position where they can't now come out and make definitive moral allegations. They can't accuse religion, and say, and as they do, take Richard Dawkins, for example, and others who on countless occasions have turned around and said, this religious teaching is wrong. This religious teaching is bad. This is objectively, and when they say it, they're talking as if they have some sort of moral high ground, that as if acknowledging morals are objective, and then attacking religion from this perspective, right? However, if they deny objective moral values and duties and they say there are no objective morals, well then they're in no position to turn around and make a definitive case against religion or religious teachings and say this is bad or this is evil. The best they can do is say, according to me, according to my subjective opinion, something I think this is wrong or bad, right? But is it actually wrong or bad? No. Is it objective? No, because they don't believe in objective moral values and duties, right? So this it puts them in a very tricky situation. Right? However, if they do turn around and say, no, objective moral values and duties do exist, and they then try to attack religion as they do, well, the first thing they have to do is acknowledge and realize, for them to ground objective moral values and duties, they need God. So if they believe objective moral values and duties exist, then God exists. So either way they go, it's almost, as they say, I think catch-22 or 28, I don't remember exactly, but it's checkmate. They have nowhere to go from this perspective. If they acknowledge objective moral values and duties exist, then they have to acknowledge God, because it's only in God that we can ground objective moral values and duties. Biology doesn't make sense, social pressure doesn't make sense, moral realism doesn't make sense, right? And if they reject objective moral values and duties, well, then they can't make any objective claims. And imagine the situation that puts them in. Imagine a scenario where a man is beating an innocent child and there is an atheist there, right? And he doesn't, therefore, if he wants to maintain his atheism, he has to be someone that says there are no objective moral values and duties. And he sees the situation and he goes to this man and he says, what you're doing is wrong, stop beating this child. And the man just turns around and says, well, I believe it's right, my subjective opinion is right. So what can he say at that point? It's his subjective opinion versus another man's subjective opinion. And there is no objective reality to what's going on. Or at least the atheist wouldn't acknowledge it. Therefore, what can he do in such a situation? I mean, it's a very difficult situation to put yourself in if you reject objective moral values and duties. I mean, again, like I said, we can't really practically function in this world if we were to do that, right? So it's a double-edged sword. And most people would have to acknowledge, as we said, that there are objective moral values and truths. We recognize them intuitively, and we speak out against injustices and evil, and with the intuitive assumption that what's happening and the thing I'm speaking out against is objectively wrong. It's not just because I believe so or I like to think so, it's actually wrong, But then if you hold that position as an atheist, you have to now ground objective moral values and duties. And as we've seen through this particular section, that you can't do that in the absence of God. So if you acknowledge objective morals exist, you have to acknowledge God exists. So a point on moral epistemology, how do we know what is good, right? Now this is separate from moral ontology, as we've highlighted. The ontological basis for objective morals are God's commands, right? We've established this, that the best way to ground objective moral values and duties is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, finding out what His commands are will facilitate moral knowledge. So this leads to moral epistemology, right? That our understanding of right and wrong is coming from the divine source, the creator, as opposed to other created beings, right? This is our Islamic perspective, that we understand that you have the creator and you have creation. Now even logically, if Allah is the all-knowing, all-powerful being, the one that wants best for us, the source of all goodness, right? Therefore His commands are good. I mean, doesn't it make sense to take our moral epistemology from the creator as opposed to other beings, other people that may try to devise their own type of moral epistemology? It just makes sense to take this from God. So the Islamic principle is that God knows, we don't. And it may be that you dislike, as Allah says, it may be that you dislike a thing which is good for you and that you like a thing which is bad for you. Allah knows, but you do not know. This is a very, very powerful point, that Allah is the all-knowing being. We don't know what's best for us always. And it logically makes sense that we take our epistemology, moral epistemology, and understanding of what actually is right and actually is wrong from the divine creator, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the sources of revelation obviously are the Quran and the prophetic tradition, preserving of religion, life, wealth, mind, offspring, and honor. These are the fundamental tenets of our tradition itself. So, to conclude and wrap all of our discussion up, we have to recognize that Allah is Al-Bar, that Allah is the source of all goodness. He is the one that all goodness emanates from, right? And therefore He is the only one worthy of worship. Shouldn't we worship brothers and sisters and submit to and acknowledge not only the source of all goodness, but the one that's revealed revelation to us, the one that has given us a moral epistemology, the most profound moral epistemology, because it's coming from the Creator. He has outlined everything for us in the Quran, what we should do, what we should or shouldn't do, what is good, what is bad. He's given us everything that we need, all the guidance we need to maneuver through this life and to live a successful life and to be successful in this life and in the hereafter. The fact that Allah has communicated with humanity and He's given us guidance, that alone, and in particular in relation to what we're discussing, in guidance in regards to morality, what is morally good and bad, and has outlined things for us. He hasn't left any, room for doubt. He hasn't left us to our own devices to try to figure things out and come up with our own moral epistemologies. He's made everything clear for us. Shouldn't we then submit to this creator and worship him alone? Of course we should, you know. So this is a very sort of beautiful and powerful way that you should conclude every argument that we make, that we're presenting, that when you present this to atheists, always try to end on an uplifting spiritual note. You know, we shouldn't just leave it with the dry philosophy. We shouldn't just rely upon philosophy alone. You know, because the objective at the end of the day in a da'wah is not to just philosophically convince someone, logically convince someone that God exists, right? The ultimate goal is to take them from that to recognizing that they were created to worship the Creator and why they should worship the Creator, why they should submit to Him, you know, and in doing so fulfill the purpose of their life. That should be the goal. You know, it's submission to Allah and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Allah is calling us to. So brothers and sisters, just to sort of summarize the entire argument in a very simple way, what we're saying is, if objective moral values and duties exist, then God exists, right? Moral values and duties, objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. And most human beings today would acknowledge that objective moral values and duties do exist. They are real. There is really something out there which is morally good and morally bad, right? And if we acknowledge this, then we have to show them, well, the only way you can ground this is through God. Biology doesn't work, social pressure doesn't work, moral realism doesn't work. And the only way we can ground morals to be objective is through acknowledging that God exists, an all-powerful, all-knowing being who is the source of all goodness, and therefore whatever He commands is good, right? That's how we present, or we should present this argument to the people that we speak to. And you know, it's extremely powerful, brothers and sisters, because you know, it not only allows us to ontologically ground objective moral values and duties, but then we can also take them from that point to highlight, well, this is where you should, revelation is where you should take your moral epistemology from. Why? Because it's coming from the Creator, the all-knowing being, as opposed to another human being, you know. And if they reject objective moral values and duties, and they have the right to do so, but then you can outline to them, well, if you say there are no objective moral values and duties, how are you going to function in this world? How can you make allegations against religion in some objective way? It's just, you're left with just subjective opinion. And it's just, in life, it's going to be your subjective opinion against another person's subjective opinion. Even if they're doing something completely atrocious and evil and terrible. That's their subjective perspective. Right? And that's a very non-practical way of living and being. So that was the moral argument, brothers and sisters. I hope that was clear, inshallah. Please do go through your notes and your slides. And when you're ready, move on to the next section. So this is part 5, I think, of the moral argument. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the Divine Reality course. We have been currently going over the argument for morality, or the moral argument for God's existence. And in this section, we're going to start off by looking at the distinction between absolute morality and objective morality. Because sometimes these two are conflated. Right? So sometimes, you know, when we say something is objectively morally wrong, it doesn't mean that it is the case in every context, right? So, for example, let me start that again.